Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I'm thrilled you're here. And I know you're going to get a ton of value from the gentleman we're interviewing today. His name is Jeb Blount, and his company is Sales Gravy. And he trains Fortune 500 companies in sales. And so you're thinking, what does sales have to do with multifamily real estate investing? And I'm going to tell you everything, because you're selling yourself, you're selling investors, you're selling sellers, you're selling buyers. So make sure you listen up, guys. This is going to be a good episode for you guys. Welcome to the show, Jeb.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I know you do a lot of speaking and talking about this topic. So let's try to gear it towards multifamily real estate investing. My audience is beginning and advanced multifamily investors that buying apartment buildings. Maybe they did single family before, and now they're moving into this space. So let's talk about, well, maybe you could talk a little bit about your background and, and how you might add value today.
Absolutely. Well, I've been investing in real estate since I was in college. I bought my first single family home as an investment property when I was 20, and I own properties all over the country, and I've been doing it ever since. And one of the things that I learned early on in the process was about emotional control. And I think that one of the core immutable principles, not only in sales, but when you're negotiating, when you're dealing with objections, and you run into a lot of those, especially when you're dealing with investors, or you're dealing with people who may not want to come off of their price for the property that you want. One of the core immutable principles is that in those conversations, it's the human being that exerts the greatest amount of emotional control, that has the highest probability of getting the outcome that they desire. And when we go back to my early 20s, when I first started investing in real estate, that was something that I learned, and I learned it the hard way because I made a couple of bad mistakes because I got a little bit too, attached to an outcome that was not in my best interest. And if you flip forward, that was 30 years ago. Along the way, I was head of sales for a large multinational company. And then I started my company, Sales Gravy, in 2006. And today, we're a global sales training company. And the same principles apply, whether you're investing in real estate or whether you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to convince clients to invest in you or to give you a shot, especially when you're first starting out. And I think that's, one of the core lessons as you just said, is I started out in 2006 with this company. It was just me. I left a big job. I jumped into a world, decided to be an entrepreneur, and I was it. And there were a lot of pressure on me to perform and get it right. But I go back to emotional control. In those moments, I had to give myself that space so I didn't make bad decisions off the bat as I was getting started.
Okay. So that I'm clear, the benefits of having emotional control when you're trying to influence someone, because that's really what sales is influence, just dig into it just a little bit more for us. So I don't want to assume. So what? Give us an example, maybe.
Well, it's really about emotional intelligence. So we call it sales EQ in our world, right? But all emotional intelligence is the ability to manage your own disruptive emotions. And there are a lot of disruptive emotions when you're investing. There's worry, there's insecurity, there's fear, there's doubt. In some cases, there's attachment, which is a really bad thing. There's the need for significance. So you walk into a room and you want to look bigger than you are, so your ego gets in the way. And sometimes there's eagerness that can also impact you. So you've got to be able to interrupt those disruptive emotions while at the same time you're perceiving the emotions of other people and then influencing their behavior. Because this is human. I mean, we can use technology to identify opportunities. We can certainly use data to give us an idea of what we should be doing with these particular properties. But at some point, you're dealing with other human beings. So we have to begin there. And the emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, which is your innate talent, your innate intelligence, which is fixed, emotional intelligence is something that you can grow. And clearly, the older you get, the wiser you get, the more you should be able to have control of your emotions and perceive the emotions of other people. But it's something that you have to consistently focus on and build.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I spent 20 years following Tony Robbins around the planet, and he's a master of training this topic as well. And now I understand what you mean. And no, you're right. You go into any interaction with another human being, and you bring this big bag of stuff behind you, and it's going to impact your ability to influence them. Like you said, eagerness. If you appear too eager, you're going to scare people off. If you've got an outcome in your mind and they feel it, they're going to feel like they're being sold. And I love it. Like Socrates said, a life unexamined is a life not worth living. You need to work on yourself and your emotional control. Very, very cool topic. So, I know that you train sales. So can we speak to maybe some strategies that someone can get just from having listened to this podcast to improve their ability? Because I consider sales influence. I don't even like the word sales. It's your ability to influence. So we speak to, some strategies for helping some of my listeners in their ability to influence?
Yeah, a couple of strategies. First is something called dual process. So
Okay.
all dual process is your ability to have empathy, to step into the shoes of the other person, and at the same time be outcome focused. I mean, face it, you're in a business situation. You're there for an outcome, and you're there for the outcome that you desire. The problem is, as you said, if you walk into a situation and you're so outcome focused, everybody can feel it. They just know that you're trying to focus on what you want rather than stepping in their shoes and understanding that person's needs. Now, the problem that we face is that we all live on an empathy scale. At 1, you have psychopaths, right? Move up from that, you have narcissists. And then up from that, you have more self-centered people. As you move over to, say, an 8, 9, 10, you move into hyper-empathic people who can literally feel the vibration of trees. Now, if you're an investor, you're going to fit someplace on that. And where you sit on that empathy scale is fixed. It won't change. So it's who you are. So if you're self-centered, and I'm a more self-centered person, I have to be intentional and aware of what other people are thinking and feeling in the moment. I have to make myself listen. In fact, I tell myself before I go into meetings to shut up and pay attention and stop talking. Now, if you are more on the empathetic scale, what happens is you're so afraid of being too pushy or to have an opinion that you listen and listen and listen, but you never get to the outcome. So people who are higher on the empathy scale are better at human relationships. They're fantastic. They know how to listen, but they're terrible at getting outcomes. So you have to be intentional about asking for and getting what you want. So out of every single meeting that you have, every interaction that you have, there's always a next step, always an outcome. So wherever you fit on that scale, you have to know where you are. And this goes back to being aware, like who am I? Where do I fit? All those things. And then when you walk into a meeting, understand that you're either being empathetic or being outcome driven, but you have to be both. This is dual process. And the second thing, and this is tied to this.
Okay, hold on. Before you go on the second thing, I just want to just put an exclamation mark on what you just said, because that really applies in this business, because there are a lot of analytical people in this business that are fairly introverted, and they struggle with getting out there and having that outcome in their mind. And I could see how they would be more empathetic. And so those of you listening that fit that bill, what he just said is very, very powerful to make sure that you focus on that outcome as well. And maybe, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, Jeb, but for someone like that, they may think they're even a little over the top on their outcome focus. And typically, even when they feel that, they're probably just normal at that point. Would you agree with that?
No, you're exactly right. That's when you have people who are typically introverts and are higher on the empathetic scale. And I always say this: when you feel like you're being too pushy, trust me, you're still
right.
Right. So, and it's the same thing, with people who are more self-centered. When you feel like you're going slow, trust me, you are not going slow enough. So. Right. It's, you're exactly right. And one of the tricks for the people who are more introverted is that before you walk into any meeting, any situation, you must define what the outcome you're going to be asking for is before you walk in. Because if you don't know what you're asking for, you're not going to be able to explain to the person that you're dealing with what you're asking for. And it could be something small in a negotiation. It could be something that you want to get from an inspection. It could be some data that you want. It could be that you want to have a next meeting with someone.
Or start a relationship. Yes. Or start a relationship. But I love that. So guys, those of you that are introverted, define what it is you want before you go into the meeting. I love it. Be outcome driven. Awesome. So I interrupted you. What was the second thing?
Well, the second thing is, and this is the introverts are good at this, but they're not aware of what they're doing. And the self-centered people like me are terrible at this, and they have to be aware of what they're doing. And this is, I think, so important for the people that you work with in your industry, is activating the self-disclosure loop. So let me explain what this is. When we're investing in real estate, people are always hiding something. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. But there's this bubble that you're in commercial real estate or in real estate investment. And both parties, whether it's a party of investors or it's an individual, both parties are trying to protect their own interest. And because of that, you have a highly emotional situation. Even though it looks like it's really data driven, it's still emotional in nature because everybody wants to win in that situation. And the problem is when people are hiding things and you start asking questions of them, it's like talking to an iceberg. They only give you this much, even though there's this much below the surface.
Right.
Now, that you followed, Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins will talk about neurolinguistic programming, right, and how you can, look at people and perceive what they're thinking and saying. But I've always found that the best way to know what someone's thinking is when it crosses their lips, when they actually say it, versus trying to perceive it or trying to guess what it is. And the easiest way to get it to cross their lips is activating the self-disclosure loop. This is a really simple thing, and everybody who's in the audience has experienced this at one time in their life. You've been at a party, and let's say you're an introvert, and you've been having a conversation with someone, and the other person starts talking. And you just get out of the way and let them talk. And as they talk, they begin to self-disclose. They begin to tell you more about themselves. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, they cross the TMI zone. And you're thinking to yourself, I can't believe they just told me that. And by the way, you've been on the flip side of that. You've been having a conversation with someone. You've been talking. And suddenly you say something that you shouldn't have said, and you shouldn't say it. But your brain says, wow, that was incredible. I'm going to do it again. And you dig the hole deeper. Harvard University, a group of researchers there, did a study in 2014 where they put people in 3D MRIs and they took pictures of their brain while they were having an opportunity to talk about themselves or brag about themselves. And what they noticed is that each time someone self-disclosed, the pleasure center of the brain lit up like a Christmas tree. And what was happening was they were getting a dopamine hit to the pleasure center of the brain every time they talked about themselves. And we know this to be true. This is I guess self-evident that people love to talk about themselves, even introverts, once you get them going. The problem is that we have to get them going. We have to activate that. And the way we activate that is asking people questions. We start off with easy questions that give them an opportunity to talk. We want to ask them questions that give them an opportunity to brag about themselves or to talk about themselves. And we want to avoid getting in the way. And this is where disruptive emotions hurt us, because every human being has an insatiable need to feel important, to feel significant. And this insatiable need is the singularity of human behavior. So when you're dealing with someone as a human and they're telling their story and they're self-disclosing, you don't feel significant and you don't feel important. So what happens? You start talking. And when you start talking, you start stepping on this loop that if you shut up and allow them to talk, they're going to get below the iceberg, right, below the surface, and they're going to give you information that you wouldn't get otherwise. And if you observe great negotiators, if you observe people who are really good at investing, they're fantastic at getting people to reveal things that they're trying to hide, but they understand that what happens is once the person starts revealing and this loop gets started and they start getting, we call it brain crack, right? They start getting this shot to the pleasure center of the brain. It gets very, very hard for them to continue to hold their cards close to the vest.
I love it. I love it. It's the whole, Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and influence people. You ask questions and let people talk and have a sincere interest. But I love what you said about get out of their way. You don't fill up the uncomfortable silence. You just let them dig deeper and talk. Love it. No, I'll have to look into that 2014 study at Harvard. That's very, very cool. I know you've got a book called Objections. Can you speak to, how that might come into play for someone that's in this business and overcoming objections that pop up, maybe some high-level strategy?
Absolutely. Well, let's just think about, what you do as an investor. As an investor, you have to go out and you have to ask people for stuff. You're asking all the time. You're asking for information. You're asking for relationships. You're asking for data. You're asking for people to give you a better deal. You're asking for walkthroughs. You're asking for everything. You're asking for referrals. You're asking for connections. You're asking all the time. And when you ask, it creates just this incredible vulnerability. And the reason that it does that is because we are hardwired as human beings. This is baked into our DNA to avoid being rejected. And this really goes back to about 40,000 years ago when the human brain first evolved. We were all living in caves, living in huts, living in teepees, and we depended on each other in groups. And if you, for example, got kicked out of the group, if you got kicked out of the cave, it was survival for real, and you were likely not to survive. So humans develop this natural sensitivity to being rejected. And by the way, this is a double-edged sword, because this feeling of vulnerability of being rejected or ostracized or banished, it helps us in our human relationships because it tells us where the lines are drawn with people. But the flip side of that, when you're investing in real estate, is when you're going out in the world and you're asking and you're essentially prospecting for opportunities. When you're doing that, and by the way, even if you're running your own show and you're running your own buildings, you're asking people to pay you rent, this comes into play, right? So if you feel this vulnerability, what happens is you hesitate, or you stop, or you don't push, or you don't ask. And oftentimes, especially on podcasts like this, like we'll tell people, just let it roll off your back, or we treat it like it's some psychological disorder, but it's not. It is as biological as anything that's human. And the way that we deal with this emotion of rejection is different than any other emotion. And you'll know this in the audience, if you've ever been rejected, if you go back and start thinking about that rejection, you can feel it and experience as if you were already there. You can't do that with any other emotion. And the reason is that our brains through evolution want us to remember what it feels like. So if we pull all this together, we've got this big problem. We have to ask all the time. We have to ask for things, and we have to be forward and assertive and assumptive and confident in what we want. And this fear of rejection gets in the way. So the book Objections is really about beginning with how do you gain this immunity to rejection, or rejection to become rejection proof. What do you need to do to interrupt this disruptive emotion? Because I can tell you something, the most powerful place for a real estate investor, the most powerful platform and position is that of assertive, assumptive confidence. Because when you're confident, people move towards you. And when you're desperate or you're weak or you're passive, people move away from you. So what Objections does is addresses how to become rejection proof, and then gives you a series of frameworks that you can use in those situations to get you in control of those disruptive emotions that are natural, and put you in a situation where you can compel and influence the other person to say yes.
Oh, I love it. I totally did not know that's what your book was about, which is actually a topic I teach at my live events, which is, dealing with those limiting belief systems. I tell the story of being rejected on the playground when I was a kid, and bullies, and forming this question, this disempowering question, which was, how can I show them I'm good enough? Because I hated being rejected. And so many people suffer from this, and most of the time it has no basis in fact whatsoever. Now, and I love what you just said about assertive, assumptive competence, because anytime you go into an interaction and you assume a positive outcome, it's like it's done, and it greatly enhances your ability to have that positive outcome when you go in assumptively. No, I love it. I love it. So it's, I thought it was more about handling objections you got from the other side. No, that's awesome. So let me ask you this, Jeb. Really enjoying this conversation a lot. What if you could teach school children one thing for an hour that would massively help them in life? What might you choose?
Oh, this is such a great question, because you mentioned Dale Carnegie.
Right.
If you could go back and read one book every single year, you would read How to Win Friends and Influence People. Right. It's the greatest book ever written, written almost 100 years ago, and it still holds up today. So if I was with a group of school children, my focus would be on teaching them how to listen better. So how to understand that when you are the listener, you're in control of the conversation, and that in all human relationships, we're basically checking off 5 questions. So when I'm dealing with you, there's 5 questions that you're asking of me. And by the way, this is true when you are investing in real estate too, and you're dealing with other people. And every person that's interacting with you wants to know 5 things. Do I like you? That's number 1, right? So are you safe and secure? So, do you have a smile on your face? Are you confident? Are you assertive? Not arrogant? Number 2 is, do you listen to me? because when you listen to people, they like you, right? And third is, do you make me feel important or significant, the most insatiable human need? And the easiest, fastest way to make someone feel significant is to listen to them. And by the way, when you listen to them and you make them feel significant, you give them the greatest gift that you can give another human being. And when you give them a gift, you create obligation. When you create obligation, they're more likely to move to the next step with you. They're more likely to give in a negotiation. They're more likely to help you with more information. Number 4 is, do you get me and my problems? Do you understand me? So do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? And do you get me in my problems? And that's core to human beings. Like, we want to be understood. So we go back to the self-disclosure loop. When I ask someone a question and I get out of the way and they start talking, I make them feel important, I create obligation, and it allows them to make sure that I understand where they're coming from. And when I understand where they're coming from and I use their language in my conversations with them, if I go back to the stories they told me, they begin to trust me. And when they trust me, it becomes almost impossible for people not to build a relationship with me and not to do business with me. So if I were with a group of children, that's what I'd be focusing on. How do you answer those 5 questions for other people?
What was the 5th one?
Do I trust and believe you?
Do I trust and believe you?
Yeah. Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems? And do I trust and believe you?
Love it.
You know, and when we're thinking about, you know, what Dale Carnegie taught us, and you talk about Anthony Robbins, who, you know, is an amazing master of this, what Anthony taught us, and really, you know, what you're teaching people from the stage about, you know, the story about when you felt bullied and you wanted to prove to other people that you were significant. And I have a very similar story in my background as a child, you know, on the playground being bullied, and how I spent so much of my life trying to prove to people, you know, that I was worthy. I think that if we go back to those 5 questions, those questions are about other people. They're not about us, right? They're about stepping back and giving other people the stage. And, you know, one thing that I've always known in my life is that, even though I haven't always lived this rule, I know it, is that people never complain about people who listen to them.
No, love it. Love it. No, that's something I struggle with all the time, is still to this day, is really just shutting up and listening. You know, I get excited and but I love these 5 points. Awesome. So let me ask you this. What's one characteristic, you know, as people get into this business, you know, they really step into a leadership role. They step into, you know, they take off their employee hat, they put on their entrepreneur hat, and they become a leader. What's one characteristic that you believe every leader should possess?
I think that for me, for a leader, is understanding that you're a servant, and that, you know, we can go to Ken Blanchard in servant leadership, but I believe that character matters more than competence. So as a leader, you've got to recognize that all the people around you, whether they work directly for you or whether there's someone that you need in your circle of influence, you're leading them by focusing on them first. And what I teach leaders is that when you're dealing with the other person and you're in a leadership role, they're asking 2 questions of you. The number 1 question they're asking is this a person who has my best interest at heart? In other words, can I have a relationship with this person? Are they someone that I like because they have my best interest at heart? Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, they're going to like you because you're always a great leader. They're going to like you because they know that you are looking out for them, you have their back. And number 2, can this person get me in position to win? And if you just think about that, this is the same question you've asked of every leader in your life. It's the same question I've asked. It's the same question we've all asked. Now, sometimes we're asking this question at the subconscious level, not necessarily consciously, but we want to know that. And because when you're a leader, you're going to have to make unpopular decisions. You're going to have to do unpopular things. You're going to have to sometimes, you know, do things that no one likes. And you're going to be the most unpopular person in the world. But if all those people believe that you have their best interest at heart, and they know that you're consistently helping them get what they want, they're going to run through a wall from you. And we just go back to Zig Ziglar, who said, you know, if you help enough people get what they want, then you'll get what you want. That's what great leaders do.
Love it. Love it. So, you know, let me ask you this. Who inspires you? What makes you jump out of bed in the morning, or what inspires you?
You know, we go back to the bully on the playground. I mean, it's so funny that you brought that up. And I've never said this before, so I'm gonna reveal this in public. But you know, there was a lot that came out of my childhood. I was one of the smallest kids. we moved into a town where I was a stranger and it was really nichey. And I was bullied on the playground for most of my elementary school years.
Mhm.
And, out of that crucible, you think about this has been, 40 years ago that this type of thing was happening. But out of that crucible came, this like innate drive. I've got this competitive streak in me that is really hard to quench. And you could say this is a bad thing, that I'm always out to prove that I can win, but it's also a good thing if you channel it in the right way. And, what really inspires me is I hate to lose. I hate to lose. And I'm willing to grind it out and do whatever it takes and wake up every day and work harder and longer than anyone else. This morning I woke up at 4 o'clock, which is not normal for me, but I was stewing over something. And I got up early this morning and came into the studio and came into the office. And for 4 hours, I just busted my rear end until I figured it out and got it done. And that's kind of me. And it's not like a who, it's a what. And one of the things that I do, and I don't know if this is, if there's something you do, but I always have some competitor. I've got some foil out there that I point to and say, that's my competitor today. And I got to pass you. And when I pass you, I have to find someone else. And that also can be a bad thing as well, because sometimes I don't look kindly on people that I consider to be my competitors, but I always have to seem to have that person. I need my Darth Vader, I guess, in my life.
Oh, that's awesome. It's so interesting because I had a lot of parallels, and you mentioned the two sides of the sword as it relates to that dynamic, and in my case, massive success, but at the cost of not being there as much as I would have liked to for my family. It's a double-edged sword. It pushes you if it the positive side, but you do lose some things on the flip side. So what's your favorite quote, brother?
My favorite quote, God, that's a good one. My favorite quote is, "In God we trust, everyone else we follow up on."
Oh, I like it. I like it. So let me ask you this, and everybody thinks this. I mean, you're very, very successful, and there's a lot of parallels between your history and mine. Everybody thinks that road to success is a straight line and that it's easy. What did you have to sacrifice to get to where you are? I know you've got a big company, you're teaching a lot of people, you're adding a ton of value in the world. What did you have to give up?
Well, you talked about family time. When I was building this business, I started off my first 4 years in this business, it was me. Right. And me on the phone, cold calling. I left a big corporate job. I had, 2 assistants and, corporate jets and all the things that you would typically have in that world. And I left there and started my own company, and I was grinding every single day. And the problem is that I was grinding so bad because I'd made so many stupid mistakes. I mean, I'd make a mistake and then have to go fix it. And I'd make another mistake and have to go fix it. Kind of like an ant, like running into things until it figures out a way around. That was kind of in that space. So I had to sacrifice a ton of time with my family, and my son was growing up at the time. So he's 21 now, but when I started the company, he was in grade school. And even though I picked him up every day in the afternoon, a lot of times I was working until midnight. So I tell people, in my first 3 years in starting this company, I don't really remember it because I was so tired, because I would work until my body hurt. Like I would be sitting in my chair in my home office, because that's where I was working, like a lot of your clients. Mm-hmm. And I just would get to the point where everything on my body hurt so bad because I'd been in that place so long trying to build the company. And like you said, it's not a straight line. I shudder at all of the mistakes and the stupid things that I did along the way. And the only thing that got me past them and didn't create disaster was the willingness to grind through it and to learn from it and keep going. And when I made a mistake, just fixed it fast and kept going. But, I'll never get those years back, again. Now, on the flip side of that, my 20-year-old son goes to a private university that's paid for. He has no college debt. My family and I live a lifestyle that, I was, an executive in a Fortune 500 company. That's 20 times what that was. We do things and go places and experience things that we would never have been able to do had I not gone through that period of time. And I wouldn't change it for the world. But there is a lot of regret when I look back on it for the things that I missed. And some of that regret is I probably didn't have to miss those things had I been a little bit smarter when
that's the thing. That's my greatest regret in life, actually, was coming home to my kids, $8 million house on the beach, playing with them every night, but being distracted. I wasn't there mentally. It's my biggest regret to this day. You know, my kids will tell you I was a great dad, but I didn't live up to my own expectations. So we could have, both of us could have done it differently. You know, had we been a little more evolved, maybe had, you know, a little more introspection, have the knowledge that we have now. But so let me ask you just a couple more questions. You've added so much value. Was there an aha moment in your life, at a moment where you're like, okay, now I get it? Does anything come to mind? I know I didn't prepare you for any of these, but you're doing great.
That's a really good question. I think that the aha moment for me was 2 years ago. And now this is kind of weird, right? So my company has grown fast, and I was with one of my clients, so out in California, and he offered me a ride to San Francisco. I had another gig. We were up in Redding, California, had a gig in San Francisco, and he was heading that way and said, you know, let me offer you a ride. Now, normally, I think to myself, well, I spent all day long with this client. I need some alone time. I've got a plan. But for that moment, I said, all right, let's go. So I hopped in the car with this cat who had, from his living room, built a $50 million company.
Nice.
And I spent the 3.5 hours on the road asking him about his aha moments and what had changed. And that ride from Redding, California to San Francisco changed the shape of my company.
Wow.
And then Jason, if you're listening to this is about you. But I listened to what he had done. I got smarter. I picked apart my business just going through the period of time. I took a lot of the distraction away, dialed in exactly what we do, and we've doubled the size of our company 2 years in a row because of the 3.5 hours that I spent. And I think, if I say there's aha moments, there's these moments in your life that are presented to you, and the question is, are you going to take them? Like when your intuition says you should do this, you should. And I remember that day distinctly because my intuition said, go get in the car with this guy and go and drive to San Francisco. This is going to be fun. And I paid attention to it. And I would say, for everybody who is listening or watching, pay attention to your inner voice, pay attention to your intuition. It's almost always right. And, and when you run into those moments where you meet a person or you're in a situation and it feels good, follow your instinct and be aware. Don't do dumb things, but follow your instinct. And a lot of times it will make a massive change in your life and in your business.
I love it. I love it. I teach my coaching students to trust it on the flip side. If they get a bad feeling in their gut, to make sure they don't ignore that. But I love using it for the positive. That's a fantastic example. And just recognizing the importance of having relationships with people that are at another level than you are, and allowing them to influence you through questions and as much time as you can spend with them. I tell you guys, go out there and have lunch with people that are making it happen. Take them to dinner. Try to add value to them in any way that you can. Just be around them and they will lift you. Love it. Well, let me ask one last question. If you could give my listeners one last piece of advice, what might it be?
Wow, that's a really good question. I would start with where we started. Right. I would go back to this. My piece of advice is this: in every situation that you are in business, it's the human being that exerts the greatest emotional control that has the highest probability of getting the outcome that they desire. And if you are true to yourself and you look back, whether it's the bad feeling that you had that you ignored, whether it was a situation where you were too eager, or whether you were attached to winning an outcome and you became arrogant, whatever it is, if you go back and look at most of the mistakes that you've made, almost all of them were caused by your emotions. They were caused by something that impacted you. And you should never forget that it's the human experience. It's what people feel as they're going through the process with you that is usually the most consistent predictor of outcome. So if you were weak or passive, or if you were overbearing, or whatever the case is, it creates a poor experience. And I'll leave you with this quote from Maya Angelou, and we've all heard this quote that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So go back to managing your emotions so that you can influence the emotions of other people.
Love it. Love it, man. Man, I've taken notes furiously, guys. And if you've been listening, you haven't been taking notes, go back and listen to this again. Tons of great stuff. Thank you, brother. You added a ton of value. It was absolutely my pleasure to meet you, and really going to be following everything you're doing. I know you've got lots of books out there. Guys, it's Sales Gravy is his company, and really very impressive. Thanks, my friend.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, that was awesome, brother. Thank you. Really very impressed. You know, I have a high-level mastermind. There's usually about $3 billion in the room. These guys all have larger organizations. You know, it might make sense for you to pop in. Where are you based? I'm
in Augusta, Georgia.
Okay. Well, maybe even come in via Zoom or something. I promise it'd be worth your while. You know, let me just before I let you go, I mean, is there, you know, these guys all have organizations, they have companies, you know, there are thousands of units. Do you ever do like a keynote or something like that to add value to these guys and obviously, you know, build your own company?
Absolutely. So that's pretty much, last year I spent 311 nights on the road, and that's pretty much what I do. I'm either giving keynotes or, you know, and the first quarter is pretty busy for us. When I say pretty busy, we're on the road every single day, including weekends.
Holy shit.
You can possibly imagine. I'm in China and India, South America, you know, a lot of North American stuff. So absolutely. And we've done some work in your space. So RealPage is a client of ours, which plays big in multi-family homes. So absolutely, I'd be very happy to do this. And it's a good conversation for pulling it out of our rear ends, wasn't it? So
yeah, no, you kicked ass, buddy. You kicked ass. So we have I'm assuming we have your team's contact information. I'll get it and I'll email you. I've got an event in March in San Diego, and then I don't have my calendar here in front of me, but I'll email you the dates, and if you can make it live, that'd be fantastic. If not, maybe just come in on Zoom for an hour and add value. All right, my friend. Well, it was very much a pleasure. This will probably go live fairly quickly because I really enjoyed it. I've got a big backlog, but I really enjoyed this. So it won't be next week because I got my 300th episode, but probably the week after. So we'll let you know. You can put it out to your peeps as well.
Sounds good. I think you guys know Lisa. She'll get it to me. We'll get it out on
Sounds great. Sounds great. All right, brother. Happy New Year. Take care. See you.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments. For more resources or to connect with us further, please visit our website at rodkhleif.com. Tune in next week for our next show.